Investor demand remains focused on their short-term liquidity funding needs, according to traders at UBA, who also observed an improved activity in Nigeria's bond space, with pension fund administrators being the dominant participants. On Thursday, Ifeoma Onyejekwe, a fixed income trader at UBA, joins me as we review the trading week. Thank you so much for your time on the show today, Ifeoma. Interesting week we've seen in the markets there. Just kind of run us through how things played out so far.
Thank you, Kenneth, for having me. So this week began with illiquidity. Like you said, we saw traders focused on their short-term funding needs. So there was a lot of sell-offs, especially on the short end of the OMO spectrum. However, OMO maturities came in on Tuesday, and that helped to alleviate the illiquidity seen in the markets. And we saw some bullish runs on the back of payment of OMO maturities. And then the CBN held an OMO auction on Thursday, where 20 billion was offered, and then 18.3 billion was sold. However, we saw very healthy subscription of about 62.18 compared to 58 million subscribed last week. And in the bond space, beginning of the week, due to pressure in liquidity, we saw some sell-offs. However, pension funds came in strong on Thursday and to close the week, where we saw some buys throughout the short, mid, and long end of the bond spectrum.
All right, but what is your crystal ball telling you about liquidity for next week?
Well, next week, we're expecting NTB maturities of 91.28, as well as OMO maturities of 80 billion on Tuesday. So next week is going to be a very liquid week, and we expect more activities in the treasury bills and in the bond space by next week.
All right, now looking at the PFA activity we mentioned earlier, what do you think is driving that, and do you think that can be sustained going into next week and further?
Well, most likely. We're not exactly sure what exactly was driving the buying sentiment, but it seems to be on an upward trend, and we still expect, since, like I mentioned before, there will be quite a substantial liquidity coming in next week. So I expect more buying auctions from the pension fund players also next week.
All right, looking at next week, yes, you said you expect to see better liquidity there, but I'm looking at that yield curve activity, and what are expectations going into next week?
Well, I expect some decrease in the yield curve, and last NTB's auction, we saw a decrease in the stop rates on the long tenor bills. So I also expect next week NTB auction to show a decrease in stop rates. So yields will likely trend down as we commence next week trading.
Yeah, so about 91 million on offer, a billion on offer next week's PMA next week.
Yes.
But talk to us on some of the intricacies on how you think things are going to play out there.
Subscription very, very healthy. This OMO auction, there was a lot of demand. Unfortunately, those demands were not met, and then we saw that play out at the end of the week in the treasury bill space. So I expect very, very healthy subscription in next week's auction. However, it's likely the maturities are likely to be prorated, so we would see demand. However, not all that demand will be filled.